Alright, welcome to my Intro to Python class. We're on class 5, module number 3, handling exceptions and errors using try except blocks in Python. We're jump to our Jupyter Notebook, day 5. You can jump down to module 3, exceptions handling and errors using try except blocks. The idea with try except is we're going to want to put our code that has potential to cause errors or things happen outside of our control, such as if we lose internet or a file gets deleted or we're doing some kind of math operations that could be potentially outside of bounds of mathematics, like dividing by zero. So how do we handle those kinds of situations and have our code not instantly stop? So if I just run code, and we'll just say my int1 equals 10, and we'll say my int2 equals 0. And then let's go ahead and print out my int1 divided by my int2. And then I'm going to print out some other message, pretending like my code would just continue on. We'll say got here. That's my favorite debugging statement, just to see if we actually get to this line of code. And when I run this, you'll see I never got the got here because I had an error, a divide by zero error. And this happens every once in a while, not specifically a divide by zero, but there's always times in our code where things happen outside of our control. Like, for instance, if that file gets deleted or gets modified or some configuration is misconfigured, all kinds of exceptions could actually arise in our code. We have this concept of try. We're going to try our code, and if it succeeds, great. And if it fails, then what happens? How do we gracefully tell the user and have our code continue on so we get to the statements below our line of errors? Because we want our code to gracefully handle some of these exceptions that happen along the way. Now, forgive me if I use the word catch. So right now we call it try except in Python. I come from a C background, so it's always been try catch. You think of errors get thrown. Like if you think of baseball, maybe you throw an error, something has to catch that error. In Python, we use the word accept, so you're accepting that error. Same concept, just a little bit different terminology, and I do ask for forgiveness because I've grown up so much in that C language that I might actually slip up and say the word catch, but what I do mean the word accept. So how does it work? Just like we did with the looping variables, or looping like functions like the for and the while loop, we do a block of code. Or similar to our methods, we use a block of code. So we'll use our try, and every time we use a colon, remember we're going to indent 4 spaces to create a block of code. So now you notice that my int1 and my int2 are now part of this try block. Now let's go ahead and add the print statement into our try block as well. So I indent it 4 spaces. And I want to handle any exceptions using my except block of code. So I go back 4 spaces and type the word except. Hit the colon, and then I want to do something here if there's an error. So let's just say print got an error. There we go. And then I'm not going to do anything special. I'm just going to say got the error, and then I'm going to go back to my normal running code down here below. So let's go ahead and run this block of code now, starting up here at this try statement. I'll go ahead and hit the run. And you'll see, hey, we got this error. And I didn't print anything out because I just handled whatever error code was there, and all I did was print out got the error, and then it continued on with my code. So when we catch or accept that error, we're taking responsibility for handling the thing gracefully. Well, what if I open a file and the error happens when that file gets open? And now I've got an open file, and we saw with the last lesson, where the last module, where if a file's got a lock on it, the operating system can't close the file, you can't delete the file and all that, because Python has a hold of that file. So we have an other option here. So we have the try, where we're going to try our code, and if everything works great, like if I make this 10, then what will happen is there's no error, and I'm not going to get my error, and I'm just going to continue on. And life is hunky-dory, right? Nothing, no error codes, continues on, runs my print statement here, does not print my error exception, but does continue on to my code. So except only happens if there is some kind of error thrown. The next thing I want to talk about is that idea of the file being locked. There's another term we can use called finally. Our finally block of code always runs. So let's use my example of, actually we'll leave this code here, we'll just copy it, and I'll create a new block of code below it, and we'll continue on with our example. Let's try something like my file, open, I don't know, we'll say myfile.txt. And you'll see that that file exists down here, and I'm going to open it in read mode. Now, so I've got the file open, and if I close it over here, and I run this code, we will be fine because I don't get an error, and you'll be able to see that I'm able to actually delete that file. So we'll go ahead and run this. Oops, I forgot I didn't put anything in the finally catch. Let's do our statement called pass, which is a no operation, but at least it just tells the interpreter that we understand that there's supposed to be code here. We're just passing for right now. We'll come back to that and add that code later. Okay, so we should be fine, and I should be able to, let's open this in a copy path. We'll open up our Explorer folder, and I think it's in the D drive, so we'll go to D, Python class, Python files, and there you'll see there's the my file. And I can delete the file. I'll hit the delete button and you'll see it disappears. Control Z to bring it back. Now what happens if I have that error statement? So we'll add that in as an error. And we got an error, and we got here, but what happens if I try to delete that file now? You'll see I get that error because Python has got a hold of that file. You'll see the Python, and I'm not able to delete the file because it didn't get closed. So these kinds of statements come up from time to time. When the error happens here, I never was able to run this block of code, this line of code in my try block, because as soon as the error gets thrown, the except block is going to grab that error, and nothing between where the error gets thrown and the except block is actually going to get run. So in this case, my file.close was never actually run. To fix these kinds of issues, we can put stuff in this finally block. Finally is a great section of code because this will always get run. If I get into my try block of code and it has an exception, it'll go to the except block, and then it'll go to the finally block. If I have a try block of code and no errors happen, it still will execute everything in my finally block. So there we go. Let's see if I get here. Print. This is after the error. Go ahead and run that. And you'll see we got an error. This statement never got printed, but I did, and I don't know why I closed the Explorer window. We'll go back to it real quick. If I try to delete the file now, it deletes no problem because Control Z to undo that, because Python let go of that file handle when it got to this close statement in my finally block, because finally always gets run. Alright, so let's print, well that's good for that error there. One other thing I want to point out is there's one other section of code that we can also run. It's called the else, We've seen it with the if statements, we've seen it with the for loops, but we can also run it in our try blocks. I'm going to copy a print statement here, and I'm going to say only runs if no error. So our try blocks can get complicated, right? We have the try, where we're going to put our risky code that might or might not cause an error. We're going to have our except section, our except block of code that runs if there is an error. And then we have our else block that only runs if the try block successfully completes and gets to that last line of code in the try block without any errors. Then our else block runs. And regardless of if there's an error or there's not an error, our finally block will always run. So we'll go ahead and run this now. And you'll see I did not get to here. But if I change this to not cause an error, we will see not only do I get this statement, but I should also get this statement here. There we go. So this runs after the error because that's the line of code that we ran. There is no error. Then my else statement prints only run if there is no error. And last, my file is closed in the finally block. And then we get to our line of code outside of our entire try except section of code. So our try, except, else, and finally. This shows how we handle all errors. If I'm going to be generic and handle divide by zero errors, file errors, type value conversion errors, all these types of errors will always work with this kind of concept. We can be a little bit more granular with our except blocks when we can we can accept on different conditions and only catch certain types of errors and deal with a divide error differently than we would with a file open close error. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next upcoming section here. So I know this one was a little bit short, but we'll get into a lot more details in the weeds when we talk about the different types of errors that we can handle, how we can accept them and manage them in our code. So hopefully you'll take a quick break and join me back here in a few minutes for Module 4.